Welcome to the Mirror Media Podcast with Mukunda Raghavan.
Namaskaram and hello everyone. Welcome to the Mirror Media Podcast. My name is Mukunda Raghavan, and I'm also joined. Co-host today is a friend, my cousin Krishna Parthasarathi, who's a musician, and we actually have a very special guest today. Now, again, I say this all the time: special guests, but every guest is special because they bring something so unique and beautiful about our tradition, our culture, our history, that it's nothing but our own privilege to have these people come on the show and talk to us. So today we have Dushyanth Sridhar, who is an Upanyasaka, or in English we would say a lecturer, but in a much more narrative storyteller type than really just a lecturer like a professor. So he is an expert on Visisthadvaita Vedanta and Sri Vaishnavism. He has also started a fantastic website called Deshikadaya.com, which is a repository of Vedic scriptures, information that anyone can get. And on a side note, he is also an actor. Well, he acted in one movie particularly about Vedanta Deshika, where he also wrote and sang in it. And it was a fantastic movie. So Dushyanth, thank you so much for joining us. We are very blessed to have you here. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to really practice and understand and get into the heart of Sri Vaishnavism?
Namaskaram Mukunda and Namaskaram Krishna. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with two people who have regards, respect, and a lot of zeal to know about our Vedic civilization. I'm Dushyanth Sridhar. I was born in Bangalore, largely raised in Bangalore. I come from a pious family, but very unconventional for being an Upanyasaka, a public speaker on Indic scriptures, because my mother would listen to Harry Belafonte and Abba while in her, I still remember we used to have those cassettes.
Yeah.
And my father used to be sporting a huge mustache, which was a big taboo for being a father of an Upanyasaka. And he was from St. Joseph's and the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. So that way, I was raised in a very unconventional background. None whom my hands could reach were in this art of dispensing knowledge in the traditional fashion. Nevertheless, I was put into the learning of Sanskrit shlokas, right from Deshika Stotramala to Narayaniyam to Bhagavad Gita and so on, as well as the Tamil hymns called Nalayara Divya Prabandham by the mystic saints called the Alvars at a very young age. Again, with not the intent that he would become a speaker one day and will be talking to Mukunda over Zoom. But it was notwithstanding me at home that they wanted to find an avenue out. So barely did they think that this avenue that I was put into would one day become my passion turned profession. So I was I studied in a convent for some time, and then I moved to another school in Chennai, and then I went to Pilani. So this is about my regular schooling. Besides studying this, of course, I learned the Sanskrit hymns and the Tamil hymns. At about while I was in my higher secondary, I got to know that the pontiff of Sri Ahobalamat, who was the 45th Pattam Azhagiya Shingar, who is His Holiness Narayana Yatindra Mahadeshikan, was delivering lectures to the US audience over teleconference between 2001 and 4 on a very rare work of Tirumangai Alvar in Tamil called as Tirunedin Tandagam. So that's deemed as a work that brings the quintessence of Vedanta. So even without informing my parents, I used to go to those classes after my coaching classes were done, because my parents had only one aim, that I should become an engineer like the 27 engineers that we have in our family. So so if I weren't one, probably I would be an outcast or I would be guillotined. So so I went to those classes and found those classes a bit of an OHT. OHT is overhead transmission.
Right.
But
overhead transmission. OHT.
So this is a this is a age-old term used by Bithians. So we used to have this as lingo. So then after I went to BITS, while I thought that I was reciting hymns, my vice chancellor and dean said, why don't you start giving upanyasams? So it was just a maiden and amateur venture of a novice, and then I started giving, and the little population that used to attend, maybe 30 or 40 students of my batch who used to attend, who basically wanted to encourage me and motivate me, kind of liked it. Then I came to Bombay for a period of over 6 years. I worked full-time with various multinational corporations in market research and strategy. Alongside, I started releasing CDs, DVDs, and started giving public lectures. At one point in time, the bookings were so high that I had to call one of them quits. Then I took the road less traveled by, as what Robert Frost says, and came up to being an Upanyasaka.
Wow, that's a long, interesting journey. I mean, what really drove you to learn about these? I mean, like Krishna and myself, and I imagine a lot of people from whatever tradition in India would learn some of their like stotrams. Like I grew up learning like, Nyasa Dasakam, Sharanagati Gatyam, and all these things, but these were just rote memorization, right? As a kid, your parents teach you chant it, and then that just goes on, right? But what drove you to really want to jump into this and learn about it?
See, one is, of course, what we learn and what we read and what we know. So that's the content that we derive or harness from our scriptures through various means. It could be Shravanam, Kirtanam, whatever method.
Yeah.
The second is how we deliver that content. So this how we deliver is what makes an Upanyasaka. And what I know is what makes a Jnani. So an Upanyasaka necessarily has to understand what he or she should learn, and should also kind of hone his skill of taking this content to the masses. Because when I deliver a content in Tirupavai, or let's assume that's a work by Andal, and let's take I deliver something on Ramayanam, I will have a variety of audience. So when I come to the Bay Area, I have an audience there. When I come to Los Angeles, I have the Malibu Temple. When I go to New Jersey, I may have a Chinmaya Mission. When I go to a Dharavi, probably the largest slum in Asia and Bombay, so I have 500 audience who are, I would say, mutually exclusive to the audience in Bay Area. When I speak from the understanding perspective. So, but the person who's delivering is only Dushyanth. So I should have the art of delivering the same content and make it relatable to two different genres. So to me, I thought I have this little skill blessed on me, and why not use this for a larger purpose of making people aware. See, using the word spreading Hinduism, using Hinduism is something that I don't like. We don't want to spread Hinduism. We just want to kind of make people aware of what Hinduism is. So to create that awareness, it's very, very important. Even in this virtual world, though we are at different locations, we are still speaking. So speaking becomes a necessary art. So if I am one amongst 1,000, when I say 1,000 people who have learnt Nyasa Dashakam, Sharanagati Gadyam, what all you said, but I may be that one amongst those 1,000 who's able to take that content to the masses. So I thought I should make use of this opportunity to reach out to people. Of course, just a trivia to this question that you've asked. Generally, people, when they ask this question in any interview, they may expect an event from me, wherein they would expect, like, I was sleeping in the afternoon, I had a dream where somebody came and touched me, I woke up, and the next day I became a speaker. Nothing of that sort. I personally don't believe in the supernatural thrillers and miracles. I believe that it's only pure knowledge and devotion that can probably take us one step better. So
Sure.
miracles could have happened. I am not denying, I'm not ridiculing anybody, but from my perspective, it's a very simple journey of, I found the skill, people liked it, so I want to hone it and use it for a better purpose.
So
Hey, can I jump in?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, this is beautiful. Dushyanth, sir, can you please tell us a little bit about your gurus and people who have influenced you in your life and who have helped you on the path?
So there are two aspects to this, Krishna. One is what content we learn. So, for example, I would want to, I don't know whether people would like to call me that way, but I would call myself a Pauranika, because I delineate
Can you
and
repeat that? This is a new word for me. Can you repeat that again? Sorry to interrupt.
Pauranika.
Pauranika.
Pauranika. For example, you say itihasa is, in general terms, in history, in Indian Hindi language terms, it's history. But in Sanskrit, itihasa, the exact translation is direct account.
Mhm.
So in Hindi, if there is a historian, they would call him an aitihasika. So from the word itihasa, like how beauty becomes beautiful, itihasa becomes aitihasika. So a person who uses itihasas and Puranas to delineate, Puranas becomes Pauranika. So, I would call myself a Pauranika because most of my lectures kind of revolve around Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, Vishnu Purana, and the other Puranas. So I generally don't give many lectures on Vedas and Vedantas, because if I would give more on that, I will become a Vedanti. Since I deal with Upabrahmanams, I'm a Pauranika. So to be a Pauranika, people would generally ask, oh, you're telling so many things from Ramayana, Mahabharata, I didn't know of, I didn't read this in Amar Chitrakatha, where did you learn this? Honestly, no Acharya would teach us Ramayana and Mahabharata, in my understanding. So what we need to learn is the foundation, which is Vedam and Vedantam. So Vedas, Vedantas, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutram forms the foundation. So in my understanding, I have learned that Ramayana, Mahabharatam is what I have read, heard of various people. I research and I delineate. Why the foundation is very important is, if the foundation is not established or not known, there are very heavy chances that I will speak of Ramayana in a certain fashion today. Maybe 10 days later, I will be influenced by another person and I'll end up giving another philosophy out of Ramayana. So I should be very clear about the foundation. Like, for example, I want to, since you're a musician, Krishna, suppose I have to do Neraval. Iha paragati nine indira ramana, iha paragati nine indira ramana, iha paragati nine. So I should know that this is a Devarnama. I should know this is a Kalyani composition. So then I need to take the suitable line or a phrase from that particular composition to delineate. Since you've learned from Jesudas, is what I understand. So he would do it very beautifully. Bhajare chitta balambika. In that, the Charanam, Muthuswami Dikshita tells. So there is one beautiful phrase which I don't remember offhand, where he delineates. So for doing all of this, shouldn't your ground of Sarali Varisai, Janda Varisai, Meltattu Varisai, Alankaram, Geetam, Varnam, Swarajati be good? So to delineate on a ragam or to use Graha Vedam, I should know what these ragas are. Likewise, Vedam, Vedantam becomes very important. So for that, I have learned Sri Bhashyam. I have been learning from Villur, Nadadur, Sri Bhashya Simhasanam, Karunakaracharya Swami. Gita Bhashyam, I have learned under, he has attained Paramapadam. Vaikunthavasi Sri Srivatsangacharya Swami. He was the erstwhile principal of the Mylapore Sanskrit, Madras Sanskrit College. So then I learned Rahasya Trayasaram and Bhagavad Vishayam from two acharyas, Nelvoy Sauminarayanachar and Tevanar Valaham Saranathachar. Then I learnt just two vadams of two aphorisms stated by Vedanta Deshika in his Ptolemaic work called as Shatadushani from Navalpakam Ramanuja Tatachar Swami. He is also a Vaikunthavasi, he's no more. Then I learnt Tirunedin Tandagam from the 45th Pontiff of Ahobilamat. So this is my learning.
Wow, that's fantastic. Recently, I also interviewed Stephen Phillips, who I believe also learned from Ramanuja Tatachar for...
Stephen Phillips or Francis Clooney?
Stephen Phillips. I think did Ramanuja Tatacharya do the
okay.
on Nyaya. He wrote on Nyaya too.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
So, yeah, Stephen Phillips studied under him and wrote a big treatise on, I believe it was, I forget.
If it's Nyaya, we have two works of Vedanta Deshika, Nyaya Siddhanjanam and Nyaya Parishuddhi.
Mm-hmm.
And besides this, if he has worked on Nyaya, there are many other stalwarts who have contributed to Nyaya system. There is Navya Nyaya as well.
Yeah, this was a book on Nyaya. I haven't seen it.
Is it Nyaya Dhyumani or something?
No, this is the one I have. This is it's Gangesha Sattva Chittamani.
Okay.
Is this the same NS Ramanuja Tatacharya? Yeah.
Okay,
so
wonderful. Exactly the same Acharya. I learned two vadams.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic book by Gangesha, which is very interesting. But no, I mean, getting back to your background, I mean, so did you always have belief, nambike, in the beginning, or was it something that came with time and kind of spending time with the text and the scriptures, or was it easily flowing for you?
See, the process of believing was never new to me, or was not a path that I had to take, because either, I don't know, because of the influence of the family, or it was inbuilt. So nobody told me this is God. So from the day I have known, I've been able to connect with somebody supreme.
Sure.
So there has never been a doubt. But there have been many doubts with regards to the system of how do we understand this portion of Ramayana, this portion of Mahabharata.
Right.
So the question of, it's called the process of interpretation. So how do I interpret this particular anecdote? How do I interpret this particular episode? So there have been doubts. There have been many questions where I have bombarded my acharyas with, and they've been very patient and benevolent enough to answer me. So that process is still on. I still have many doubts.
Can you tell us about some of them? Can you tell us about maybe one doubt or two?
See, for example, I agree with the distribution or the distribution of labor, which was done through an erstwhile system called the Varna Ashrama. So we have the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra
You're
Jati.
starting with the very controversial topic.
So there we have the distribution.
Yeah.
But most of the acharyas have agreed that all of them are equal in terms of their status, with being the material body, the Panchabhautika Shariram, or the Jivatma in the eyes of God.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt. But when it comes to practice, probably I still don't, I'm not completely convinced of why the Shudras were not allowed to learn the Vedas. See, here, Brahmanas were exceptional. When I say exceptional, were different from the other three, because Brahmanas could learn and impart Vedas. So he could learn Vedas under an Acharya. He was given the right to impart. That's okay. So you're giving a certain community to practice a certain profession. That's okay, because when you're speaking from the US, you say that most of the jobs should be reserved for the Americans first. So you too have a certain reservation system. But my point is, when it comes to learning, I feel there should be no discrimination. When it comes to imparting, maybe that becomes a profession. When it comes to learning, I have always felt Shudras need not have been denied the the opportunity to learn. Nevertheless, there is a nuance here. Though they were not allowed to learn the Vedic statements, like how we call it Santai, they were allowed to listen to the quintessence of Vedas. See, they cannot learn, for example, Ajayamano Bahudha Vijayate. That line they cannot learn. But if I'm going to explain the essence of the line, they can learn. So in most parts, I understand the explanation is much more important than the statement. But even the statement, I feel they should have been, or they could have been given the thing. So I'm not completely convinced. Otherwise, I feel it's more or less a very, very open and a very liberal system. When it comes to practice, there have been discriminations, there's no doubt. But in theory, it is not a very biased system, except this part, which I feel could have been. So there are many, many such questions which come to my mind. I ask my acharyas, and I hope, but I am of the opinion that when I have a question, I should not expect an answer immediately. You know, some people at the gunpoint will ask, okay, tell me the answer. Now, no, certain answers will come over a period of time and you will know it through your experience. You don't have to wait for another person to give you that 3-minute answer, which begins with a capital letter and ends with a full stop.
Sure. But I think the point you brought up here, which I find very interesting, is because I think not only the way you're grappling with these issues, I think the texts themselves grapple with it. Mahabharata has this sense where you have sometimes a strong Varna Ashrama system and a very strong other system where people are saying a Brahmana is not defined by their birth, but by their knowledge. Shudra, there is clearly a tension playing out in the text itself, right? Because for me, I feel like when I read through a lot of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and even a lot of the older texts, I mean, some of the Puranas, and even it gets a sense of there's a tension between we believe the system, but we also find there's issues because whether or not the origins were great, at some point, human beings always inevitably corrupted over time, over age, over a period of
Kali Yuga.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that too, but we have to be very frank in the dialogue that we have to, in many ways, grapple with this issue because it's not like the Vedic time was always perfect. There's some amazing, beautiful things, but it was also human beings involved, right?
True. See, while you made a reference to Mahabharatam, there are 2-3 episodes that could be highlighted. For example, in the Yaksha Prashnam, it comes in the last part of Araneyaka Parva in Vanaparva. Yeah. So Yudhishthira answers to 124 questions posed by the Yaksha. Mm-hmm. The last few questions, there is one interesting question where Yaksha asks, how do you define a Brahmana? Is it by birth? Is it by knowledge? Yudhishthira gives a very interesting answer. He says, it is neither by birth, nor by a learning of the Vedas, nor by understanding the quintessence of it, but it is only the character of the person which determines him as a Brahmana. Mm-hmm. Now, if this is where it stops, probably we may find it a lot more logically tenable. But he also says, some say that even people who perform Agnihotram are Brahmanas.
Yeah.
This is how he concludes. So, the answer itself, so if character alone determines a Brahmana, then there should be no corollary to that answer.
Yeah.
But if he says that even people who perform Agnihotras are Brahmanas, then what about people who perform Agnihotras but don't have a character? So, so I find that answer good, but it may lead to an iota of doubt in the listener or the researcher's mind. So that's one incident. Second is, we have understood the compilation of the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras or the Vedanta Sutras from Badarayana, who's Vedavyasa.
Sure. Yeah.
Vedavyasa was born of a Brahmana called Parashara and a lady who grew up in the fishermen folk called as Matsagandhi.
Yeah.
So again, would we call this Varna Sankaram? Because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Varna Sankaram, whereas two Varnas come together.
Can I just point out something? I just want to point this out, which I find very interesting all the time, is Arjuna complains about Varna Sankaram. Krishna never refers to it again. He never talks about it. Arjuna is the one that says in chapter 2, this is what's going to happen if the women fall, the kingdom falls. But Krishna never addresses it, which to me, that silence, I think, is more telling than the fact he didn't address it.
Right. He doesn't speak about it, but he even doesn't admonish it.
No, he doesn't. But I think for him, from my perspective, is Krishna saying, that's not even an important thing for me to talk about. Let's talk about the more important thing here, which is karma, jnana, bhakti. For him, that's all societal things. Those change. That's just my interpretation. But again,
yeah. And the third incident, Mukunda, in Vanaparva, we come across a very interesting episode of this is narrated to Yudhishthira by Markandeya, if I remember it right. I think Markandeya only narrates it. Yeah. So it's the incident of Dharma Vyadha. Dharma Vyadha was a butcher.
This
and
is Kaushika.
He used to sell, Kaushika Rishi. So he gets to know from the woman and then goes to the land of Mithila. And there he was wondering where this person of immense knowledge is, wondering he would be a sage. And he in turn finds him to be a butcher who's selling the meat of a buffalo and pig. Because that's what the line says, Varahaha and Mahishaha. So that's the mamsam that he sells. Yeah. And to this butcher, many rishis were on the waiting to understand the nuances of Dharma Shastra.
Yeah.
So Mahabharata comes with two diametrically opposite episodes. So yes, the Puranas give a lot of space for us to interpret, misinterpret, research, over-research, everything.
Yeah. No, I just find it fascinating because for me, like, this is one of the most beautiful things about Vedic tradition and civilization is the ability for them to deal with diametrically opposite positions and give space for both of those to exist and everything in between to exist, right? Like even again in Mahabharata, the story of Saulabha and Janaka, right? It's a beautiful, like when historically speaking, Shudras and women were not allowed to read Vedic scriptures or hear Vedic scriptures or pronounce them. But the story of Sulabha and Janaka flips that story, right? It's a beautiful story of she's giving him knowledge about Atmajnana. And I always find so much the Mahabharata, and this is why I think Vyasa's correct when he wrote it. Everything you find here, you'll find everywhere else. What you don't find here, you won't find nowhere else. And I think he's totally right because that text is the cornerstone of everything that is the source of Hindu or Vedic thought. Everything is preserved there beautifully. And so for me,
Mukunda, you just made that comment about what you find in Mahabharata. Can you come again with that the meaning of that verse?
Yeah, it was whatever is found here, you'll find elsewhere. But what is not found here...
Whatever is found here?
You will find elsewhere.
Okay.
But what is not found here, you'll find nowhere else.
So this is the direct meaning of that verse. Yadi hasti tadanyatra yanne hasti na tatat pachit.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Velakudi Varadacharya, the illustrious father whose centenary is being celebrated, he's the father of Velakudi Krishnan Swami.
Okay.
He used to state, the meaning of the verse is, what is found in Mahabharata is found nowhere else. What is not found in Mahabharata can never be found anywhere else.
Interesting.
Because now comes the question, how could you overinterpret the verse? To that, I remember another verse from Ramayana, because this is a very common verse. What is it? Yavat sthasyanti girayah saritascha mahitale tavad Ramayana katha lokeshu pracharishyati.
As long as the mountain stands.
Yavat sthasyanti girayah. Till the rivers flow, waters flow in the rivers, and till the mountains exist. Yadi sthasyanti girayah saritascha mahitale, till those exist, tavat Ramayana katha lokeshu pracharishyati. Till then, the quintessence of Ramayana will be spoken about and will be spread throughout the world, is the meaning of the verse. But in Sanskrita Lakshana Shastram, you have the ability to change Yavata and Tavata. Yavata is like if, till then.
Yeah.
So what they say is, it should be like this. Till Ramayana is spoken of in this world, only till then will rivers flow and mountains exist. Only till then will rivers flow and mountains exist.
Hey, Mukunda,
Yeah.
this is my first time joining on this podcast. Do you want to do a musical interlude?
If you want to play, or if you wants to hear
Let
something.
me sing one line of Hanuman Chalisa. Why not? Why not? Right? We're talking about Ramayana right now. All this Ramayana. We have to sing one line. But Dushyanth, who did you learn Carnatic music from? You sing so well, and you have such knowledge of raga and all that.
So I learned for a very brief period of 5 years under Bhavani in Kritika in Chennai. But whatever little I know of comes with a lot of listening. And my grandfather used to identify ragas just like this, and he used to sing. So my grandparents used to listen. So in Tamil we call it Kelvi Jnanam. So it's more with Shravanam.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kita, we could end with that, but I want to ask a few more questions because.
Just a thought. Let's continue.
Yeah. So Dushyanth, I think this is really interesting. So with getting back to, you learned all these things from your acharyas, and then you decided to do upanyasas. Now, in this process of doing upanyasas, did you ever face any hurdles from modern India, right? Because India is also going through a bit of a churn in terms of figuring out its identity for modern world versus its history. Did you face any hurdles getting through with like your friends, your colleagues, or whatever that was?
See, with respect to 2-3 factors, I wouldn't say hurdles. Yes, there were some kind of problems. One, with respect to my style of delivery. Mm-hmm. So while I speak on the stage as well, I'm starkingly no different, because people are used to the styles of the very, very famous, whom I adore and respect, Sengalipuram Anantarama Dikshitar, Brahmashri Sundar Kumar, Mukkur Lakshmi Narasimhacharya, Balakrishna Shastrigal, and Embar Vijayaraghavacharya, my Acharya Karunakaracharya, Velukudi Krishnan, Pullavar Kiran. So they were all like stalwarts in their field, and they had developed a certain Pani. For example, that Bani will be like, Himani Hantavyam Himagiri Nivasai Gajaduro Nishayam Nidranam Apdine in the Datla Ambal Shodralam Ade Gata Bhagavad. So that is the style they were used to. And you would have Ragaratna Malikache Apdine and Tyagaraja Redikar. So that's Shastrigal, Balakrishna Shastrigal.
Oh.
And then you would have it like Vaikunthe tu Pareloke Shriyasardham Jagatpatihi. So Velukudi Krishnan Swami. So now they were used to such clear styles of delivering, and suddenly I come and say, for example, in the discourse, because I was used to it. So if there would be a Mukkur Lakshmi Narasimhacharya, the first thing that would come to my mind is Dumbledore. So I used to wait outside the libraries to get my first copy of Harry Potter. Yeah. So I grew up with Harry Potter and Animorphs and so many. So what happens is, well, I use such words like Dumbledore like once in a while. Yeah. Now what happens is the population between 20 and 40 can relate to it. But beyond 40, they understood, why should he talk about some person, Dumbledore and all of that. So, it took people to kind of accept me, that style. So I was very different from most of the other people. Not that I wanted to be different, because that was my style. I didn't have my father or grandfather's style whom I could look up to.
Right.
And I have come to this arena as a public speaker. See, I have spoken from my school days of whether science is a boon or a bane. There is more red on the wall, turncoats, jam, and all these competitions. So I've attended a mock parliament, mock United Nations. So I come with that kind of a background. So it took people for them to accept my style, and they thought if we give him time, he will change. But it happened topsy-turvy. Now they have changed and adopted to my style.
Which is that's so amazing. I mean, first of all, your upanyasas are fantastic. But if you ever want to be an impression artist, you can do that too. I think you have great skills in doing exactly what all the previous upanyasakas did. But the fact is, it's that you're able to hone in on this age of 18 to 40, because so much of and this is not just in India, but even in America and globally, it's really interesting because I find it like, even when I talk to other people within my own community, right? Like if I meet either other like Indians or South Indians, and I talk to them about like anything, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, anything, no one knows anything, right? Not a single person knows any of this stuff. So you're able to find a way to touch so many people to get them into this tradition. What is it that connects you to that? Like that connects you, be able to connect them outside from your ability to call about Harry Potter. What else is it gives you that connection?
Maybe during my course of delivering an upanyasam, see, generally I am not very for this one-day upanyasams. Generally people would say, now sir, there's 1 hour talk about Ramanum Kannanum. I do that, but I'm not a general big fan of that. See, I like the traditional style of 48-day series of Mahabharatam, 9-day series of Ramayanam. And see, that's how I'm used to, because I need to establish that rapport with my audience through my eyes and body gestures, and they will also have to establish, get the story established in their minds. So it takes time. So it doesn't happen like a miracle. So to my understanding, I like such series. And during such series, as I go into, it's like a mesh. If you see Upanyasam, it's not a simple thing like Rama went with Sita. See, I used to be fascinated by the storytellers while I used to be in Pilani, Rajasthan. So I used to go out, and in the village, there used to be a local person who used to give Ramayana. Sita Maiya ne Ram ji se शादी किया, दोनों बन गए, बन जाने के बाद हनुमान जी आए. So I used to find, of course, he's trying to reach out to a masses, and he's telling who married whom. That's okay. That's just a simple biography. Probably even Ravan movie of Maniratnam will fit into this storyline. But I need to know more. I need to understand how Bharata's devotion to Rama is different from Lakshmana's devotion. That is Paratantriyam. This is Seshatvam. This is Bhagavata Seshatvam. I need to get to the nuances. I have to dissect every story and understand why this and why not. So in that kind of a research mode, I find while I deliver lectures, I ask questions. See, for example, I ask very clearly Bhishmacharya, even before being called Bhishma in Mahabharata and Adi Parva, he's called Devavrata. So Devavrata tells tells Satyavati's father, Adyame, from today onwards, I will be a brahmachari. So there is, see, if I were a non-smoker, I'll never say, from today I will not smoke, because I've never been smoking. But if he says, from today I will be a brahmachari, there's something there. And while he passes away, Krishna tells he needs, the funeral rites of Bhishma has to be performed with the Agni of his Agnihotra. So Ramanujacharya, following the steps of Kumarila Bhatta, clearly remarks that Bhishma was a grihastha and not a brahmachari. So while I raise such questions, the audience is first of all startled, because they have seen Mukesh Khanna as a brahmachari. See, we are so fascinated by N.T. Ramarao and Shivaji in Karnan that we can't take any other version beyond that. We believe Vyasa is also secondary to K.P. Nagarajan. So that's our understanding. So if I tell Mahabharata and I say that Karna is not that great a figure what we project him to be. He's not at all. So immediately people say he was generous. See, most kings, even my grandfather was generous. So so generosity is one attribute. So to call yourself a human being, you should have something what the animals don't have, right? So generosity is one. So making a hero out of Kanna, he might have been a good warrior, but there are many, many flaws and blemishes in him. So when I point this out, the audience are startled, but the beauty is the audience stays back to see, because this speaker is different from others. He's going to tell us something different. Let me stay. So this quest for knowing something what's not known, and the process of unlearning what is learned wrongly, is what forces a lot of audience to sit back and listen.
Beautiful. That was beautiful.
That was amazing. That's fantastic. Beautiful. So go ahead, Krishna.
Can I ask one question? Because of the influence of film on the popular culture's idea of people like Karna, for Shivaji Ganeshan, like N.T. Ramarao and all that, Tiruvadiyadu, all these movies, I've seen a lot, Maya Bazaar, I've seen these movies too. A question I have for you, thinking about your future, is: have you ever considered like trying to make a proper film that's faithful to the text and faithful? Like, do you think that maybe you can make an impact? Like, you're doing Upanyasa right now. Like, do you think you can have an even larger impact by making a proper film? Like, I know you're acting as well, but like a proper Mahabharata film that like rectifies these type of misconceptions. And I don't know if is this in your cards? I don't know.
So last year, along with my very good friend K.T. Srinivas, we have registered a firm called as Deshikadaya Productions LLP. Mm-hmm. And through that, we wanted to create a visual impact of our scriptures. So the first script that I wrote was Abhigyana Shakuntalam. Beautiful. So based on Kalidasa's work, I drafted the entire story, kind of. See, all the dialogues that he has posed in a work like that may not be projectable on screen. So I had to make it cinema viewable or acceptable. So I devised a script, and then we had a team working on it. Everything was done. So in the month of February, we were planning for the shooting dates, and we had 2-3 investors who were ready to invest. But then the great Coronacharya came in. And yeah, so it's still on my card. So everything is ready. The screenplay is ready. The dialogues are ready. The subtitles are ready. The casting is ready. We have a company. So maybe next year when things get to normalcy, because we had a lot of architecture-based real locations for shooting. We didn't want to create sets. So if all that has to happen, I think there should be some kind of a normalcy in terms of the environment around, and people should have the confidence to come out. So then only we can carry out a movie making. So this is my baby step, because see, Abhigyana Shakuntalam is more to do with rasa, sentiment. Mm-hmm. So the role of animation doesn't come much there. It's about the man and the woman who were in love, were separated, come together. So it's easy for us to make. Whereas when we go to a topic like Mahabharata or Ramayana, it will involve a lot of animation, and every second animation costs in hundreds of dollars. Yeah. Second. So to make such kind of big budget movies, probably I may not be adept enough because the team will not be so big. So probably going forward, we need to have large producers approach me to be the consultant. I was approached from the Telugu industry in 2017 for a Ramayana series, but then it got halted at one point in time. So I could be a consultant to rather than taking up the onus of making a movie, because that's a big task. Sure. And you need to be extremely abusive to work on sets to get work done. So I may not fit the pack.
So I mean, I want to loop back. Yeah, I want to loop back to your acting later, especially with the Deshika's movie. But can we get into a little bit more about? Let's talk about Sri Vaishnavism and Visisthadvaita, at its core. I mean, some of our viewers might know about it, but can you tell us what exactly is Visisthadvaita, and then how did it come about, and what's the importance that it has to maybe the Indian soil?
And also how it differentiates itself from Adi Shankara in general, or Madhavacharya and all that. Like, I'd be curious about that.
Well, we'll get into that because that's very icky. But let's just start with its origins. Yeah.
So, in general, a philosophy. I can't speak of the philosophies of the world religions because I'm not adept at it. But when it comes to Sanatana Dharma, which has Veda, Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras as the base, a philosophy is formulated, and the tenets and aphorisms are postulated by a person who researches on it. So at the end of it, when a philosophy comes into picture, a philosophy's aim is to create better harmony in the society. That's why a philosophy comes into picture. Because in Pratyaksha Pramanam, Pratyaksham is what we perceive either through our external senses, which is a Pancha Jnanendriyam. What we perceive around are only differences. Because I know I won't have donuts because I'm not very for donuts, but I would like to have vadas. So even if they're of the same shape, I know I like this, I don't like that. I like the Srivilliputturu Palkova compared to an Avin Palkova because that one is fairer, white, whereas this one is dark. So I like this grandmother more than the other grandmother because see, world is full of differences. Just see around, you will only see differences. So I will sit on this chair, I will use only that pillow, I don't like this pillow. So even amongst the same, the object of the same community, Sajatiyam, or even of different communities, Vijatiyam, we see differences. So philosophy's aim is to try reducing these differences in the level, mind level, and to bring some harmony. That's why a philosophy is born. So when we deal with Visisthadvaita as a school of philosophy, it is very clear that this should not be called Visisthadvaita because Ramanuja did not call it Visisthadvaita. He just tried to present a philosophical system which also said it is Advaita. So this is also Advaita. But to differentiate this Advaita, what he has presented from the Advaita presented by his erstwhile predecessor, who's Adi Shankara, there had to be a differentiating factor. So that USP is the Visishta, which is qualified. So this word generally is believed to have come in Shruta Prakashika, which is the celebrated commentary of Sri Bhashyam, and later in Bhava Prakashika, which is the sub-commentary of Shruta Prakashika by Ranga Ramanuja Muni. So Visishta Advaita, now we call it, that's okay. It's like calling Sanatana Dharma Hinduism. So this is also Advaita, but it's qualified. What is it qualified with is one question. Now, when we have to understand our body, I'm just presenting Visishta Advaita in a nutshell very quickly, Mukunda. So for your viewers, for example, in Sanatana Dharma, we have two clear entities. One is the body and second is the Atma. So when I speak of the Atma, that is indestructible, it doesn't feel the thirst, it cannot be destroyed, it is a personification of Dharmic Jnanam. It has it acts as a substratum for Dharma Bhuta Jnanam, which is attributive knowledge. These are all qualities of the Jivatma. Now, this Jivatma, which is indestructible, which is eternal, Avikaraya, Shuddhaya, Nityaya, houses in the body which is perishable, destroyable, and attains various vikarams. So there are two entities with differing characteristics coming together. That is our body and Atma relationship, Sharira Atma relationship. But the beauty is this Shariram, though it may seem quite large and understandable in our terms, because I don't see the Atma of the other person, I see only his body. So what is seeable is only the body. It's a big one. But the beauty is the big body is completely under the control of the Jivatma. If the Jivatma, based on its karma cycle, agrees to depart from the body or is asked to depart from the body becomes a dead body and you will find them piled up in crematoriums or graveyards. As simple as that. So the body, though it seems seeable, big, and actable, it completely is under the control of the Jivatma. Likewise, the entire universe so let's assume the entire universe is the body. Like how I've spoken of my body, the entire universe is the body. The simplest example, though it may not be exact, is we relate the entire universe to the body of the Lord. We say, Bhupadau, Yasya Nabhihi, Vyadasura Chandra Suryaucha Netre, Karna Vashaha, Shirodhyauhu. So we treat the sun and the moon as his eyes, the directions as his ears. So why I told you this is not an exact example is we need to understand this example is only an allegorical example. Now we should not say, okay, Chandra is smaller, moon is smaller, the sun is bigger, like Ottakan Kabali. So that's not our point. So it's to say that the entire universe is his body, like how my body acts upon the directions given by the Jivatma, the entire universe that comprises of animate and inanimate Chetana Vastu will act upon its Atma called Paramatma.
Yeah.
So it's a body and a Atma relationship, what Ramanuja wanted to establish. Thereby he wanted to say, to understand this relationship, you don't have to negate anything. So for example, Adi Shankara very beautifully in Advaita says, that yes, I too agree with the concept of Paramatma, but everything beyond that, what you perceive and see, is actually appearing as though it is there. So this as though is Maya. So he brings in the concept of Chida Chid Vilakshanam. So he says it is different from Chetana and makes Vastus appear as though they are there. But Ramanuja says we don't have to confuse our audience with the concept of Maya, though it may seem very interesting in theory to make a person believe. I don't know if you've seen the Matrix trilogy.
Yeah, of
so
course.
There the boy shows a Karandi and he says, is this straight? The person says straight. Do you think it's bent? When the person thinks bent, then it starts bending. See, that's not the way things operate. So Ramanuja thought, let me present a simple body-atma relationship. Thereby, by this philosophy, Ramanuja says, the Jivatma in Obama, the Jivatma in Trump, the Jivatma in Mukunda, the Jivatma in Modi, the Jivatma in you, the Jivatma in Krishna. They are all the same. The bodies of Trump, the bodies of Obama, the body of Mukunda, of Krishna, of Dushyanth could differ. But still they all form a part of the larger circuit of Brahman's body. So though we may be at different places, being born into different races, religions, nationalities and beliefs, at one point in time, all of us are linked to that supreme person. So there is no disparity, is what Visisthadvaita says.
Good question.
And how is that different from Shankaracharya?
So Adi Shankara also wants to bring harmony through his philosophy. There's no doubt he is one of the foremost acharyas whom we adore and respect for having restored Sanatana Dharma. But from Advaita perspective, he says, Brahma Satyam. So Brahman is the only truth. He doesn't say Brahman is truth. He says that is the only truth. The moment he says that is the only truth, then the contrary question is, okay, I see a beautiful cabinet next to me. I see a beautiful book table next to me. I see my friend next to me. Yes, they are also there, but they are there in your eyes only as long as you believe they are there. If you believe they are not there, they will start appearing as though they are not there. And this will lead you to a state where you start feeling that these are all creations of your illusion, Maya. And the only truth is Brahman. So he says that we are living in an illusionary world and the only reality is Brahman. And realizing Brahman is the only way, he says. Or in other words, he says, it may appear that Jivatma and Paramatma are different at one level, but they are one and the same. So that's the other way he postulates. So there are many, many differences. See, if you have to talk about differences, there are plenty. And there is a work called Shatadushani by Vedanta Deshika, where he points out 100 flaws in Advaita. Yeah. And in the 20th century, we had a retort to it by Anantakrishna Shastri, who said there are these 100 flaws that you have found in Advaita are nothing but 100 ornaments for us. So he called it Shatabhushani. And to that, as a reply, my Pracharya, Uttamur Veeraraghavacharya, gave another work called as Paramartha Bhushanam. So scholars have been debating like Advaita Siddhi, Khandana Khanda Kadyam, then there is a Chandamarutam, Shatadushani. They've been talking at various levels. I don't know whether it may be applicable to masses like us. So at one point...
So this is one of them that encapsulates a lot of the arguments back and forth. Between Visisthadvaita and Advaita.
No, me and Mukunda are going to read every text that you tell us. We're going to read these books. So I the audience.
No, by the way, Mukunda, just a trivia again. So you have the Mahabharata series by M.N. Dutt.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the same row, the last book is a purple color book. Is it a Ramakrishna mission book?
No, the last one is a history of Sanskrit literature.
Oh, okay. So I have these M.N. Dutt's books as well. So
yeah.
Very good.
No, it's very helpful for me because if I don't know a certain Sanskrit word, it's there and I can go refer. Otherwise, like the Mahabharata, parts of it are very easy to read in Sanskrit, parts are very difficult. So you have to navigate it. No, but the point that you made here, I think, is very beautiful because one of the big things about Ramanuja's philosophy, when I was younger, I went through phases where you go through, being first you believe, then you're like agnostic, atheist, then you get back into the text and you start reading. And then one of the things I loved about Ramanujacharya's philosophy and overall idea is just, first of all, it's seeped with devotion. It's dripping with it. Even in his philosophical arguments, there's so much devotion to this greater entity that he experiences constantly. It's beautiful. But like the point you made about he doesn't negate anything. I guess he uses one, I forget what Upanishad it is. You get nityasya nityam and satyasya satyam. I forget what Upanishad it comes from where he quotes it saying, it is all things are true, but it's the truth of the truth. It's the reality of the reality, the eternal of the eternals. Meaning all these things are there, they're real, they exist. But the basis of that is Brahman. It was a beautiful way to connect everything we experience, everything we are, without negating anything. And I loved the positiveness of Ramanuja's philosophy, which I thought in Shankara's perspective it's called Vivartavada, right? It's the appearance of it. The things are there only in appearance. They don't really exist, I mean, a lot of it stems from the Madhyamika tradition, from Paramatmik and Vyavaharta, where he separates the two, and Shankara is the same thing. But I think Ramanuja's impact on that was it changed the face of India, right? I mean, people love to talk about Shankara, and Shankara did change the face of Sanatana Dharma in India. But Ramanuja had such a similar impact. Like for me, my understanding is the entire Bhakti movement that we see across all over India stems from Ramanuja, the Ramanandis that followed him. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I do kind of attribute that to Ramanuja, but even before, yes, the Alvars of okay, so here again, I face a hurdle with my audience because I would want to carefully accept certain portions of history. So while we go to Guru Parampara Saram, it talks about the Mudal Alvargal,
3000
like 3000 BC.
Yeah.
But in my understanding, I would keep them, in my understanding, whatever little research I've done, I would keep them between the 5th and the 7th and the 8th centuries.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have very clear reference to Kocchenganan by Thirumangai Alvar and Nachiyar Kovil, who was a Chola king. Mm-hmm. And when he has spoken about Nachiyar Kovil, it will be around that period. And Thirumangai Alvar also talks about Parameshwara Vindagaram, which is Vaikuntha Perumal Kovil in Kanchipuram, where he refers to Mamalla.
Yeah.
So that was constructed by Nandivarman II, who came from the brothers dynasty of Simha Vishnu. So all this comes in the 6th and 7th centuries, and then he's said to have had a tiff with Jnana Sambandar from Vaigai river civilization plates. We understand it's 6th and 7th century. So Alvars were kind of the forerunners of the Bhakti movement. Of course, it was later picked up by Ramanuja very beautifully. And later, Ramanuja's handling of the Alvar Pasurams and his explanations to the Alvar Pasurams were so influential that it spread beyond certain boundaries. For example, if a Vedanta Deshika or a Manavala Mamanigal follows Ramanuja, nothing surprising. But you'll be surprised, Kanakadasa of the Dasa Paddhati in the Western Ghats. See, Western Ghats was a big barrier, tall mountains. On the other side in Udupi, you have Kanakadasa in his first work called as Mohana Tarangini. He tells, Satvikollasa Ramanuja Muni Sharanu, I surrender to Ramanuja. While he had a Madhvacharya to lean upon, he surrenders to Ramanuja. And we have Swami Narayan Sampradayam, Swami Sahajanand in the 16th century, who tells in his Siksha Patri, in the Sanskrit work to his BAPS followers, that if you have to learn Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita, read only Ramanuja's commentary. That's his verse.
Yeah.
And you have Annamacharya, who beautifully followed Ramanuja from the Telugu Sampradayam. And so Ramanuja's influence was very, very astounding. And especially people liked how he respected the Varna Ashrama Dharma, yet accommodated every Varna into the Bhakti movement. By not excluding or ridiculing any Varna, he tried to involve everybody. So it's very easy to dismantle a system. But he was there to revisit the system. That's the beauty of Ramanuja.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this one. There was also a theory, and I actually probably believe it, that Ramanuja brought in the untouchables and Shudras into temples and into the movement by kind of like the story of the Gopuram, right, where he stands on top of the Gopuram saying Om Namo Narayana to give everyone, salvation. Is that something that is accepted, or is that a story that is not?
That part of him standing on the Ashtanga Vimanam. See, in a temple, you have two aspects.
Mm-hmm.
In the Dravidian architecture, you have the entry to a temple, which is a Gopuram.
Yeah.
In fact, it kind of represents the cow's head as well, because it has those two hooks at the top, Gopuram.
Yeah.
Now, at the above the Sanctum Sanctorum, you have the Vimanam.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an intermediate style of constructing a multi-tiered Vimanam. So that's called the Ashtanga Vimanam.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the first Ashtanga Vimanam built by the Pallavas in the Vaikunta Perumal temple in Uttiramerur. Then you have it in Kudalalagar temple, and then Tirukoshtiur Sauminarayana temple. So it is said that Ramanuja wanted to bring in the larger society into the Bhakti movement. There's no doubt. Mm-hmm. But Guru Parampara Prabhavam doesn't state that he went atop the Vimanam and shouted the Ashtakshara mantra. That's not told. Because Ramanuja wanted to bring everybody into the fold. He did not want to go against the caste system, and he did not want to go against the tenets of the scriptures. Because the scriptures are very clear when it states that Pranavam, which is Omkaram, should not be, the word I used is Omkaram, I should have not used, it's only Pranavam. Yeah. I should not tell what it is. It's a sacrosanct thing. So it should be recited or meditated upon by the practitioner only in his mind. There should not be even a movement. So when there is very clear indication of this, Guru Parampara Prabhavam doesn't mention Ramanuja going atop the Ashtanga Vimanam. But what he would have done, if at all he would have gone in the Ashtanga Vimanam, is he had a huge personality. It is said, Vedanta Deshika says, Upavitinam Udbhapundravantam Trijagat Punya Phalam Tridandahastam Sharanagata Sarthavahamide Shikhaya Shekharinam Patim Yatinam. Look at the king of ascetics who walks with such a stature, holding the Tridandam with a tuft on his back. The way he describes Ramanuja, I feel he'll be like one of those athletes, the gym-bodied man. He was such a imposing figure, a towering personality. So if he had risen to the Ashtanga Vimanam, he would have said, see, people of all of you living in this Agraharam, come closer. So the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Shudras, the Vaishyas, everybody would have come. Because when you see a sannyasi talking, you want to respect him. He would have said, see, there is a path for you to never be born in this world again. Do you, all of you agree that we are in misery in this world? Everybody would have said yes, because today we have corona. In those days, there would have been different other diseases, cholera, typhoid, all this would have been there. So there would have been economical problems, so many problems. So people would have said, yes, Swami, we don't want to be born on this earth. Then Ramanuja would have said, see, all of you are entitled to walk the path to moksham. Come individually to me when I go back to my matham. I will give you an upadesham of what is the route.
Right.
He would have done that based on that. So he would have not gone at the top and held a mic and shouted.
Yeah.
So see, this interpretation comes from those people who believe that to showcase Ramanuja as a social reformer, you will have to attribute things which you believe is right. But that's wrong. See, if you look at Sri Bhashyam, Gita Bhashyam, Rahasya Vedanta Deepam Saram, he was a complete adherent to the Vedic system. At the same time, from the understanding of the Alvars Nalayana Divya Prabandham, he wanted to be very benevolent towards all castes. So he wanted to accommodate everybody into this Vedic system. There is no doubt. But
so if you don't mind, I want to see if I can push back just a little bit here and get your response. So there is a twofold. I recently was reading some works on Ramanuja, and one of the things that became very apparent to me is when he's writing for a Vedic audience, he takes a very Vedic perspective. When you look at, for example, and I'm not saying he wasn't Vedic. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is when you're writing Sri Bhashya or Gita Bhashya or all these tomes, these amazing works, you're writing to a very particular audience whose authenticity you have to prove that you are following what they follow in some sense to be accepted. But at the same time, like you said, he has the Divya Prabandhams, which are opening the doors to everyone and to anyone and everyone, saying, come in, come all. This Vishnu, this divine being is for everybody, right? Every caste, every community is coming singing these songs. And then Ramanuja's life, we have stories of him like his teacher is a Gushtipurna, who is I don't know what caste. I think he was a Shudra.
No.
Who learned.
No, the Goshti Purna is Tirukoshti Udambi. See, Sri Shaila Purna, Mahapurna, Goshti Purna, then Tirumalai Andan, and so they were all Brahmins.
Yeah.
The one who came from a non-Brahmin caste, who was one of his very good guides and acharyas, was Tirkachi Nambi, who was Kanchi Purna. Kanchi Purna.
Kanchi Purna. That's my fault. So you have that his respect and the way he treats him, and then you also have Dhanurdasa, right? When at the later part, when he's older and he's going to the river to bathe, and he comes back on leaning on Dhanurdasa. I mean, you have these stories that kind of somewhat conflict with what, at least at a superficial level, of what we presume is his adherence to Varna Ashrama Dharma. I'm not saying he didn't, but I have a sense from these conflicting evidences that maybe he was much more playing lip service in some sense here to get to the other goal, which is opening the door for everyone. So I don't know what your response to that is.
So see, we need to understand that when Krishna tells Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam, or when we read Purusha Suktam verse, which has been housed in Rig Veda, both Shukla and Krishna Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharvana Veda, Brahmanosya Mukhamasid, Bahu Rajanyakritaha, Uru Tadasya Yadvaishyaha, Padbhagum Shudro Ajayata. So to this,
but it follows up, by the way, with Chandrama Manaso Jata, right? It's also talking about the nature of not only...
Exactly.
Sabash. Yeah, exactly.
So when you deal with this particular verse, except in Samaveda, if I remember, because Purusha Sukta is housed in all the 4 Vedas, but this verse is housed in the 3 Vedas except Samaveda, if I remember. Now the commentators like Sayanacharya, Mahidharacharya, Uvatacharya, Bhattabhaskara, Rangaramanuja Muni, when they comment on this particular verse, nowhere do they say that this jati, Brahmana jati, is this best and this is the worst. No. Now, from the text, we cannot overinterpret, misinterpret, or attribute something that we want to believe that this is good and that is bad. But in the society, there has been a very clear demarcation of respecting the 3 communities, and to some extent in various pockets, Shudras have been ridiculed in the past. The best example is Tirupanalvar. So Tirupanalvar was not even let into the temple. Yeah. And in the Shaivism perspective, we have Tirupungur, Nandanar Charitram. So there have been instances. Now what Ramanuja wanted to do is, see, if you exclude one pocket of your human society, the entire society can never prosper. Yeah. You should take everybody along. But by taking everybody along, he did not disregard the caste system. He said, see, on theory, the theory is good. Brahmana does Vedadhyanam, Kshatriya protects the country, and the Vaishyas bring money for the sustenance of the country, and Shudras do the services. Nothing wrong. Now, when it comes to practice, he thought that when God is equal to all, why should we exclude one community? So, in fact, he was influenced by the Alvars, because in the Nalayana Divya Prabandham of the Alvars who have given us, Nammalvar and Tirumangai Alvar account for over 55% of the 4,000 Pasurams, and both of them were Shudras.
Yep.
And Nammalvar, who has given us Tiruviruttam, Tiruvasiriyam, Periya Tiruvandadi and Tiruvaimozhi, is equivalent to Rig, Yejuhu, Sama, Atharvanam. And the 6 Prabandhams of Tirumangai Alvar, Periya Tirumozhi, Shiriya Tirumadal, Periya Tirumadal, Tirunadantandagam, Tirukurantandagam, and Tiruvelkuchirukkai is the 6 Vedangas. So the 4 Vedas and the 6 Vedangas, which are equivalent in the 4 Prabandhams and the 6 Prabandhams of Nammalvar and Tirumangai Alvar, were born into Shudra caste. So Ramanuja believes that when it comes to knowledge exchange of knowledge and appreciating one's devotion, there is no caste barrier. Probably when it comes to the daily nitya karma, anushtanam, learning, and marriages, he said, let us follow the Varna Ashrama Dharma. In fact, Vedanta Deshika says that, he reiterates that in Rahasya Trayasaram, where he tells, Jnanam koduttu jnanathai parimatri kollalam. So you can exchange jnanam. Pen koduttu pen vaanga vendam, is what he says.
Sure.
So exchange ideas. So their openness was with respect to exchange of knowledge and ideas, and to retain the societies, because what happens is there are intricacies associated with it. There is a difference in the food cuisine associated in each varna, because a Brahmana may not be entitled to even consume garlic, onion, turnip, radish, the bottle guard, the ridge guard, all of this. Because for his Vedadhyanam, he doesn't require anything more than that. Whereas for a Shudra, he is entitled to have non-vegetarian food. So now when you're going to come together as a family, you may have repercussions. But when it comes to knowledge, you can exchange ideas because it is still at a verbal level, is what Ramanuja thought.
Sure. I mean, that to me is kind of what I think, but I don't know if that's entirely what I would have to agree, because I also see a lot of differences even at that time within the societies at large, right? If you look at a lot of the evidence from land records or records of kings, you see. So I think one of the issues, obviously, when we say caste, we're buying into the Western concept of what caste is, which is not Varna, it's not Jati, it's this new construct after the British, right? So Varna is obviously, different from Jati. Varna is just the fourfold division of Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Shudra, right? The Jati is where we get a lot more of these rules of who marries who and who interacts with who and what communities which.
Right. But again, I can even quote from Purusha Sukta Bhashyam. When they explain this verse of Brahmana, I will just explain. I'll read out that particular line, because what he says is just a second.
Sure.
Now, if you, I'm just reading out from the commentary. It says Asya Chaturmukhasya Brahmana Varnaha. So that's the meaning. So Brahmana indicates Brahmana Varnaha. And then he continues, Vaishya Varnaha Uditaha. Shudraha Shudra Varnaha. So this is the Padapadakyam, Padapadartham, that is for every word he gives. Now, the same commentary, Sayanacharya comments, Yaha ayam Brahmana Jati Visishtaha Purushaha Soyam. So, for the same word, they use the word Jati and Varna interchangeably. So, so they are not different.
So then, how does that apply today? We see across the board, communities, whether you're Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, whatever, they're now being priests, they're learning Vedic rites. They're from any community, right? There's in Kerala, I think there's doing some Dalits are learning to become priests. That's happening all across of India. And, I think that's partially what tradition has to deal with. How do the acharyas that wrote in 10th, 5th, 7th, or 12th centuries, how do their teachings apply today? Does time change based on kala, desha, titi, or are those immutable things that must remain the same forever?
See, I am neither for or against it, but more than what I feel and you feel and what the scriptures feel, a lot of this is also politically driven and motivated.
I agree.
So having an opinion of yours or mine wouldn't matter there. So suppose I have a opinion. I have never been asked an opinion about this. And even if I were asked, I'm sure that they wouldn't even mind listening to my opinion. So at an intellectual level, we are discussing a Varna and a Jati and an Ashrama. But when it comes to practicality, I think things have changed and people are ready to accept the change. So we shouldn't have a problem. As simple as that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, for me, it's really about trying to understand, part of the reason I ask these questions of you is, and I asked of a few other people that come on the podcast too, to talk about this, because I think one of the big issues, like you said, politically, is there is this real assumption that what exists today, as opposed to what caste is today, has been that way for thousands of years, when that isn't true. The problem of caste today is the problem created mostly by the British in that period of time. We had other caste issues back in or Varna Jati issues before then, but this wasn't the issue that we have today. It wasn't the issue of these ossified structures, because we know people change communities pretty frequently back in the day. We have texts about that, how people from Shudras become Kshatriyas or whatever it is. We have that, but it's just this understanding that our system is dynamic in many ways. Even though certain traditions within the system might be more fixed, like even Ramanuja's system, even though it was fixed, it was dynamic. In many ways, maybe he bought into Varna Ashrama, but he also bought into the concept that moksha is for everyone. Where someone like Shankara didn't even allow moksha for anyone because women and Shudras couldn't hear, and the only way one could get knowledge was by Vedantas, right? So we have this huge monumental shift from Shankara to Ramanuja about who even is able to get moksha. I mean, would that be true?
Yeah. So Ramanuja's thought process was if God has created everyone, then that everyone has the right to go back to God. As simple as that. So if we believe one community doesn't have access or one gender doesn't have access to moksha, then we should exclude them from God's creation as well.
Sure.
So when we include them in creation, they have the right to go back to God. So he brought, though he largely commented upon in Sri Bhashyam, Gita Bhashyam, Vedanta Deepam, Vedanta Saram, Vedanta Sangramha on Bhakti Yoga, what he largely allowed people to practice, or largely what he professed, was Nyasa Yoga, which is Sharanagati.
Yeah.
So Sharanagati is all inclusive, unlike Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga still has an exclusion of Shudras and the women, whereas Sharanagati includes even the animals into its fold. So he thought Sharanagati is more relatable and applicable to all. When the understanding of Shastras is going to exponentially come down, he thought this is the only way out. So he wanted to include the entire society into one fold of reaching God. So that way, yes, he has kind of been within the system, respected the system, and kind of made the system palatable and acceptable to all genres.
Okay. So go ahead.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Dushyanth, this is my first time joining Mukunda on the podcast, so I still don't know the protocols. So I keep asking him if I can jump in. But a question I have for you is something that I'm facing right now as a 37-year-old Indian American living in the Bay Area. Is you can edit all this out if you want, Mukunda. A lot of Indian Americans have an inferiority complex, and the reason they have this concept, not even amongst just Brahmins, Iyengars, Tam Brahms, or just every Indian American, is because they ask themselves the question: if our civilization was so great and we had such great philosophy, such great practices, how is it the white man conquered us? How is it that the British man conquered us? How is it that they, like, I'm living in the Bay Area right now. Why am I not living in Bangalore, where I'm from? I'm from Bangalore. I'm from Chennai. Why am I living in Albany, California, Berkeley, California? Mukunda is living in Southern California right now. The reason is because the British conquered us. So that, like, Indian Americans had this inferiority complex that we're not as good as the white man because they took over. They conquered us. And so right now, like, half of your Upanyasa...
So conquering, with respect to conquering and having a colonial rule in India, we cannot
sorry to interrupt, but if our philosophy was, the question that people ask me is like, if your philosophy was so great, if your knowledge was so great, how did you allow this to happen to your civilization? Like,
okay. Wait, I'll give you the answer. I understood your question. See, the point is, when we speak of a Mughal invasion or colonial, the imperialism that we had in India, it had very little to do with philosophy. It rather had to do with power, money, and the way you manipulate things.
But
so,
what good is philosophy? It doesn't manifest in the world.
Yeah. So, for example, it's the same philosophy that probably makes us accept. See, one thing that we need to understand is a philosophy will not help you fight on ground. A philosophy is what will help you sustain. See, if we were so gullible and so naive, probably after the imperial rule, we should have had the entire Vedic civilization, which should have been wiped out. We didn't have that. So the philosophy is very strong at its roots. When I come to Bay Area, I still have I was in Seattle, I had Americans listening to my lecture on Yadavabhyudayam. So a civilization thrives on how well the philosophy is sustained. And the rule in a country is determined by who's powerful. So a philosophy will not help the ruler. Probably a philosophy can help the ruler become very naive and ignorant, because he'll start viewing the world as innocent, like how he could be. So probably that way the philosophy has spoilt us for choice. And otherwise, I don't see that as a big factor today, because most ancient civilizations, I've been to Egypt, I've been to China, so the civilization, the culture, the languages, the beliefs, the systems that they had during those civilizations is also good on paper. Not 1% is seeable today, because the landscape has changed, the religion has changed, the belief system has changed. So if I go to Egypt, I just see the pyramids, the Sphinx, the Sun Temple at Luxor, the Nile River. Nothing else of the civilization, the religion, the language, everything has changed. But today I still have the Aruna Prashnam, what was recited that day, even today. So if the civilization has sustained, it's only because of the resilience that we have shown in terms of patience. And this has very little to do with East India Company, because I would thank them, because otherwise I wouldn't be speaking English and I wouldn't be speaking in the Western world about my civilization, which tells that even your path is as good as my path and both of us can still go to God.
Right. And I think just to add to that, this is just a blip in time, right? This is a moment in time where especially if you look at the large span of Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, it's 5,000 years, of which 400 years, little less than 10%, is been under some sort of rule, right? Now we're reasserting, coming back to, like I loved what Dushyanth said in the beginning, we're not trying to spread it, we're trying to, inform it, to get it out to get them to know. So on that note, I want to follow up a question in particular about Visisthadvaita in this. So Visisthadvaita is very much focused on, Sri Vaishnavism is very much focused on Vishnu and Lakshmi as the Paratattva, right? What does that first mean, and how does that connect to the other gods or other deities within the larger pantheon of Sanatana?
Okay. Before I answer this question, I'll connect my charger to the.
Oh yeah, sure.
Take your time, please.
With respect to your question, Mukunda, first of all, there has been a debate about this Vishnu Lakshmi union itself in Sri Vaishnavism. I'm not getting into what is right and what is wrong and what have been the interpretations. Just in overall approaches, we have had many hymns from the Puranic times that talk about Vishnu and Lakshmi's dampatyam and their superiority. So one thing that our acharyas have relied upon is, of course, Ramayana. And then Vishnu Purana, we have especially lines like Nitya Vesha Jaganmata Vishnu Shri Ranapayini, and that continues, and we have verses from Lakshmi Tantram as well. Added to this, we have the quotations of Tiruvilla Tevarai Teren Mintevu and so on, Agalagille Nirayumenna Alarmel Mangai Urai Marba from Alvars verses. Now, coupled together, the first work that emerged exclusively on Lakshmi was Ramanujacharya's Chatushloki. So we have Kantaste Purushottamaha till Gadhopa Gudhanite, which is the last line of the fourth verse. Now these four verses form the basis of understanding what that Paratattvam is in Sri Vaishnavism. Though we have had many works after that, Sri Stavam of Kuratarvan, Sri Gunaratna Kosham of Parashara Bhatta, Sri Stuti of Vedanta Deshika, Lakshmi Shatakam by Kumara Varadacharya, Lakshmi Sahasram by Rasanipale Venkatadhvari Kavi. So we have had many works on Lakshmi, but Yamunacharya's Chatushloki forms the basis.
Yeah.
Now, two major commentaries that emerged out of it was Periyavachan Pillai's commentary on Chatushloki and Vedanta Deshika's commentary on Chatushloki. Now, with respect to Vedanta Deshika, he speaks in this commentary as well as in many other works that Dampati Deivatam Naha. He says that the ultimate tattvam that we Jivatma has to reach out to is a Parabrahma Tattvam, which is the Dampati. So he treats the man and the woman, Narayana and Lakshmi, the couple, as the Tattvam. There have been differing opinions. Now, how do the other deities fit into this system? So there has been some amount of understanding and misunderstanding in our own philosophy. See, many of them, just because Vedanta Deshika or Ramanuja state that Vishnu and Lakshmi, the divine couple, form our upayam, our destination, they think that to ridicule, disregard, or underestimate other deities is their right, which is not true. Vedanta Deshika, for example, let's take Hayagriva Stotram. He tells, Dakshinya Ramya Girishasya Murtihi Devi Sarojasana Dharmapatni Vyasadeyopi Vyapadeshya Vachaha Sfuranti Sarve Tavashakti Leshaihi. So he tells that the power of knowledge bestowed by Hayagriva falls on Dakshinamurti, who's Lord Shiva, on Saraswati Devi, who's the wife of Brahma, and Vyasacharya, who has given us scriptures. Nowhere he says one is greater and one is superior. He says this is how knowledge was dispensed. Likewise, when he speaks in Paduka Sahasram, he makes a very beautiful reference of Ardhanarishwara. Then while speaking in Hamsa Sandesham, he talks beautifully about how the breeze, Rama tells the bird Hamsa that's going to fly to Lanka that you'll be crossing Kanchipuram, and there you will be cooled by the winds, because the winds will carry tiny droplets of water and snow which have been falling on Shiva's matted locks since he stays in Himalayas, and it will also carry the pollen grains of the flowers from a mango tree, because it's Ekambreshwara. Eka Amram means one mango tree. Yeah. And he also says that there will be pollen grains of Bandhujiva flower, which is red, because he has been keeping Parvati's feet on his head. And this is very similar to what he tells in Sri Stuti, Padalaksha Rasankam. So there has been immense respect attributed by our acharyas towards all the deities. But the philosophy states like how Mukunda, Krishna, Obama, Modi, me, everybody form a part of Paramatma's body. Likewise, Lord Shiva, Kartikeya, Vinayaka, Parvati, Brahma, Saraswati, Indra, Navagrahas, everybody also form a part of the body. So besides Vishnu and Lakshmi, who is the core of that body Atma relationship, everybody else is a part of his body. So it's like, for example, this is my right hand, this is my left hand. Now both, I cannot say one is superior and one is inferior, because both of them belong to the same Atma. Likewise, all these deities whom we speak are part of the Lord's body. So if I ridicule Lord Shiva or if I ridicule Parvati, I'm actually ridiculing the Atma inside, who's Vishnu. So at the same time, for example, I worship Mukunda. Instead, I say I'm going to worship Mukunda's left hand. I'm going to worship Mukunda's left finger. The philosophers say when you worship Mukunda, it indirectly means you're worshipping all the entire universe. So our understanding is respect every deity, but worship only one.
Okay, interesting. So when Sri Vaishnava goes to, for example, a Shiva temple, is it proper for them to give namaskarams and obeisances, or to give a prayer? Is that something that's due? Like for example, when you sing a song right now, or Krishna sings a song about Madhuri Meenakshi or Shiva, or what does that mean for them when they're singing?
See, traditionally, scholars in the Vaishnava Sampradayam have not been to any other place besides a Vishnu temple. In fact, many of them have not even been to Vishnu temples, because for them, their orthodoxy and their acharam is so high that within their house only they have lived. So going to one temple is something very unique. Today, people go to many temples, because in those days, Badrinath, Muktinath, Tirupati was a luxury. So you have to go in the forest. So the Sri Vaishnava scholars in the yesterdays have rarely gone out to temples, and even if they've been, they've restricted themselves to Vishnu temples. But today, there are still people who say, I will not go to a Shiva temple. That's their right. But at the same time, they don't mind going to a Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So this is a contradiction. So sure. you why wouldn't you not want to go to a Shiva temple? So the concept of not going to a Shiva temple is being raised, not because traditionally, I'm speaking on the book, there could be people who are like Tivra Vaishnavites. I'm not talking about them. But what is the reason? People generally ask me, sir, we visit both Tirupati and Chidambaram, but why don't you come to Chidambaram? So that's a question that they ask me, but I don't mind. I've been to Chidambaram. But the point is, it's not related to the deity. First, people should get over this. It's not related to Lord Shiva, because if Lord Shiva is called an outcast or not to be worshipped, then the Brahmin scholars should stop reciting Sri Rudram and Chamakam from Vedas. Because in Vedas, there's nothing called an Iyer Vedam and Iyengar Vedam. There's only one Veda. So, Yataishu Shivatama Shivam Babhuvate Dhanuhu Shiva Sharavyata Mridaya. When I tell this in Rudram, I do it with the same devotion like how a Smartha does. So, the tug of war is not with respect to the deity. It is with respect to the Agama. See, for example, Shaiva Agamas, which are the signs to build a Shiva temple, are 28 in number, like Nakulisha, Pashupatam, Kalamukam, and so on. Now, all these Agamas, along with the Puranas, like Linga Purana, Shiva Purana, Agni Purana, they all form the basis of constructing Shiva temples. Now, for example, in Kanchipuram, you might have you've heard of Varadaraja Swami temple.
Yeah, I've been to that temple. Yeah.
You have been to Kamakshi Amman temple.
Yes.
You have been to Ekamreshwara temple.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not.
Now, you must have heard of Kachapeshwara temple.
I don't think.
Have you heard?
No.
Okay. Have you heard of Sharabheshwara temple in Kanchipuram?
I have heard of that one, but I've not been.
Okay. Now, in Kanchipuram, if you do a bit of research, you will find 10 other Shiva temples, each of them named after the avatars of Vishnu. The basis what the traditional Shaivites have given is, it seems Lord Narasimha came to protect his devotee and annihilate Hiranyakashipu. In the due process, they say that Narasimha developed a lot of arrogance. So Lord Shiva came as Sharabheshwara to tear open Narasimha. So if you look at the West Gopuram of Meenakshi Amman temple in Madurai, you can do a research. You can even check on Google. If you do a zoom of the first two tiers of Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple, you will find pillar breaking and Nrisimha emerging out of it. The consecutive motif will be Nrisimha being torn by Sharabheshwara. Now the same anecdote comes for all the 10 avatars, and there are 10 temples in Kanchipuram that commemorate this. So Matsya Avatara is killed by a form of Matsya of Lord Shiva. Kurma Avatara is killed by Kachapeshwara. Similarly Varaha, similarly Nrisimha, similarly Vamana, you've got. Now, traditional Vaishnavites have believed that the agamas could be different. There is a Shaiva agama, there is a Vaishnava agama, the rituals could differ. But if ridiculing becomes a part of the culture, see, for example, let's take Ranganatha Swami temple in Sri Rangam. Let's take Venkateshwara Swami temple in Tirupati. Let's take Varadaraja Swami temple in Kanchipuram. I'm talking about the prominent ones. They are also huge temples, beautiful architecture. You've got the Sesharai Mandapam in Sri Rangam. You've got the 100-pillared Kalyana Utsava Mandapam in Kanchipuram, constructed by Achyute Devaraya around the 1520. We have the beautiful Ranga Mandapam constructed in Venkateshwara Swami temple. So there are motifs, there are descriptions. But probably when you have time, you have to go. And if there is something wrong, point out to me. Is there some sculpture which ridicules Shiva, Parvati, Ganesha, or Kartikeya? Is there something? We have to do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
See, the thing is, whatever little I have known or I have seen or I have researched, it may not talk about them. That's okay. It's not talking about Lord Shiva. It may talk only about Krishna and Rama. That's okay. But imagine there is a depiction of Vishnu coming and taking his chakra and cutting off Shiva's head, and there is a big sculpture. Would a Shaivite come to this temple?
Probably not. No.
So when I find sculptures on the tiers of the Gopuram where Narasimha is being killed, Kurma Avataram is being killed, Varaha Avataram is being killed, and how will I be able to go to that temple? So Vaishnavites have a point that, see, there is no problem with the Vedic portions in the Vedas that talk about the supremacy of Lord Shiva. No problem at all. We need to adhere and respect that. Be it Sri Rudram, Chamakam. Same is the case with Puranas. For example, like how we have an Ashtakshara Mahamantram for Lord Vishnu, there is a Panchaksharam for Lord Shiva. You will be surprised, where does this Panchakshara mantra's meaning come from? It comes in Bhagavata Mahapuranam. So there are 3-4 sargas devoted only to explaining how great Lord Shiva's name is. So now, for example, there is a temple where there are sculptures where Lord Vishnu is being ridiculed. And people ask, why don't you come to a Shiva temple? It doesn't augur well. So my point is, see, for me, I go to Brihadishwara temple from an architectural point of view because I take courses on whatever little I understand of architecture. I'm not qualified in architecture.
Yeah.
So I go to Lord Shiva's temple. See, for me, it doesn't hurt me much because it's finally not Lord Shiva who said that you have to put such sculptures.
Yeah.
But a lot of Vaishnavites believe that these are concocted stories formed by a lot of kings and influential people to create a feud between the two systems.
Sure.
So agreed that there are debates about supremacy of Lord Shiva and Vishnu. I'm not denying that. But killing of one deity and kicking of one deity, I don't know whether this goes well with any sect. So
Sure.
probably that's the reason why a lot of the traditional Vaishnavites, see, nobody even gives a detailed explanation. See, because of not giving a detailed explanation, a lot of them start telling me, sir, we go to Shiva temple and Vishnu temple, but you're coming only to Vishnu temple. Why this differentiation? So I just laugh it out. I don't even take that to heart, or I don't shout at them, because
Sure.
if I have to give an explanation, then lot of things they will ask. See, they'll say, okay, in Madurai Meenakshi temple, there is a sculpture of Lord Shiva tearing open Narasimha. But there is another temple where there is no sculpture. Can you come to that temple? See, it's not about coming to one temple or another. It's about the system. For example, Mukunda owns 3 houses. One in Bay Area, one in Atlanta, and one in, say, the East Coast. And in one house, you have a huge portrait of you spitting at my father in the center of your hall. And I'm not coming to your house. And then I'm saying, I will go to Bay Area house because it doesn't have a portrait. Isn't it the same Mukunda who's owning the 3 houses?
No, I agree. I agree with you. I agree that makes sense. But isn't also the part of it that the same Vishnu is in Shiva, in the outside of all the, like, if the temple is like a sharira, right? If it's like a body, then you look past the body and get into the spiritual being within that temple, which is Vishnu there too, right? No, I'm just asking.
No, see, when we speak of philosophy and the entire universe is the Lord's Shariram, then naturally a Brihadishwara temple, a Gangaikonda Cholapuram, all that should feature, because they're all pieces of wonderful architecture and devotion. There's no doubt. And the devotion of Nayanmars is
mosques and churches too, right?
So so the devotion exhibited by Nayanmars is inexplicable. So it's at par with the Alvars. There's no doubt. Say, I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to temple worship, now we cannot bring in philosophy. See, we need to, okay, let me give you this example. In literature, we generally use similes. I'll use a Tamil line. When someone who's very stout comes, I say, Pushnika Vardu. Right. Tomorrow, when I make Korambu, I cannot end up using that person.
No, I get it.
So a simile or a metaphor should stop at a certain extent.
Sure.
Likewise, when we speak of philosophy, this is to bring a harmony in the society. But when we deal with Agama-based temple worship, the Agamas are starkly different, very, very different. Sure. Because, for example, there are certain Shaiva Agamas that tell that to become a sannyasi, the person has to go to a graveyard, apply the ashes from a burning corpse, and hold a skull and drink liquor. So none of this goes with a basic Vedic system. Forget Visisthadvaita. See, generally when we even go to a house to offer our condolences, we come home and take bath.
Yeah.
Now going to a graveyard and taking the ashes is not Vedic in nature. And using the skull, touching a skull and drinking liquor and becoming a sannyasi, all this is not agreed in general Vedic system. So the diff of Shaivism and Vaishnavism is just not based on Lord Shiva and Vishnu. It's not beyond. It's beyond them. It's with the rituals. But I will give you one interesting thing about the harmony, because when people listen to this, they shouldn't feel that we're talking about differences. I'll give you one interesting feature. In one of the Divya Deshams called Tirukannangudi. Tirukannangudi is very close to Nagapattinam. In Tirukannangudi, when the Utsavam happens for 10 days in a year, I think on the 8th day or the 9th day, I don't remember, or even the 7th day, the Divya Prabandha Goshti, the Brahmanas who with their huge kind of Thiruman, on the 7th or 8th day, they will apply vibhuti on their forehead. Because Alvar tells he wanted the Lord to appear as Shiva to him. So on that day in that Pasuram, the Lord appears as Rudramurti to Alvar. So to commemorate that, they will put vibhuti on the Thiruman. So there have been instances where there has been an exchange of good thoughts between the two theologies as well. But people say, well, why can't everything come into one? See, this consolidation will work in GST, goods and service tax. But it doesn't work well in theology or philosophy.
Excellent. I know. I know we've been taking a lot of your time. Krishna, do you have any more questions you want to ask Dushyanth?
You just brought it up. You yourself brought it up around this Tirumanaman versus versus vibhuti and all that. You talked about Ramanujacharya, going for universality. But my question to you is, how do you think the general population views you when you walk outside with wearing your namam and things like that? Or if you were to wear this, or like, is it, do you think that it functions more as a way of making yourself exclusive or universal? I think about this because I have a lot of good friends who are, my best friends are Sikh people. They wear their pagadi, and they have their beards, and they look very different from everybody else, right? And everywhere they go, everyone knows you're different. So I remember my father used to tell me to wear naam to school, and it wasn't about universality. It was constantly sticking out. So my question to you is, if we're aiming for universality, why do we try to look different or mark ourselves differently than other people?
See, the Western world and the historians have largely believed. It's still a theory to a large extent, where we have come from the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, the Neolithic, the Chalcolithic culture. So from the early men where they never were wearing dress. Then we started covering our private parts, and then we started coming with different weaves, and we have come a long way in terms of covering our body. Now, just imagine a person who first came up with a piece of cloth to cover his private part in the early man stage. The others would have asked him, why do you have to look different from others? Because others are not sporting it. So I believe in a civilization, over a period of time, with respect to the language we speak, the tone, the tenor, the cuisine, everything evolves. And when a certain practice is not hindering the other person's spiritual growth, when it is not mocking his growth, and when it is not physically or financially tormenting him, I believe, and the civilization believes, that such customs and rituals can continue. For example, I sport the Thiruman. To me, I find it blissful. To me, I find it good. To me, I find it as being following something what my ancestors have done. Now, if it bothers somebody else's eyes, the person should explain how. See, it's like, for example, then if we use this as an argument or a reason, then probably the whites could also tell the blacks that your color is very intimidating to me. Correct? So I believe a person's color, features, what he or she sports, what he or she applies, shouldn't ideally, logically bother someone. But your question was to universally appeal to someone. Aren't we trying to make ourselves look different? No. See, for example, if I walk on the streets of Cupertino or the MG Road of Bangalore, there are days where I don't sport the Thiruman. And there are days where I go with the Thiruman. So there is there's no thought that I have to go or I should not go. I have realized, especially in the Western world, I've been to Europe, I've come to the US for many times for lectures, that actually the good part is people are not bothered about what you're wearing. See, I go so many places, especially in the Bay Area. I've come to Atlanta, 32 cities I've come to US for giving lectures. Wherever I go with a Panchakacham and Thiruman. Nobody has even bothered to look at me, look then, and then point to the other person. See there. No, they don't do it. So they're very, very open about it. Now, the point is, a civilization will have some external features and characteristics to showcase. How much ever we may or may not like it, it will have. So the universality of Ramanuja's philosophy is with respect to the thought process and may not be with respect to the attire. So if at all, while I was in Germany, I had maybe he was like 6'7", his height was 6'7" or even 7 feet, I don't know. Because I'm 6'1", I looked like a Lilliput in front of him. So he was looking very German, but he was sporting Thiruman on his forehead. He came to the house where my host was. So he came and he had dinner with us, and he spoke well. He was absolutely a German. But I didn't ask him why he was sporting. At the end, he said, "You didn't even ask me why you're sporting this Thiruman." I said, "That's your choice." He said, "No, I have read a lot of philosophy books. I was impressed with Ramanuja's system. I came to India, found my route to a guru, had my samashranam done. I came back to Germany, and I'm a German." So, so he continues to be some, I don't know, he is a German name. We are not changing his identity. He does it of his own. So if people like it, they have the absolute right to follow it. But just because a person doesn't sport a Thiruman, it doesn't mean he's no less a Vaishnavite. We don't say that.
Good. So
a beautiful answer. I love it.
Thank you. I just one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. So
no, I have one more question too, Mukunda, before you finish.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What are your goals right now for the world? Like, I know your own spiritual journey is going on, but is there anything you're hoping for that changes in the world or India or the world at large? Like, are you hoping for some change in particular, or I'm just curious about, are you frustrated by anything that's going on right now? Like, what are you working towards right now, aside from spreading the wealth of, Vedanta and Ramanujacharya's teachings? What are your goals right now?
So, in my understanding, the last 15 days, on the 30th of July, I have begun my Abhinava E-Patashala, which is the online platform, a contemporary or a modern online platform to acquire Vedic knowledge. So under this umbrella, I have premiered a course called Bharatiya Sara Bodhani, which is a course with about 21 subjects and 40 e-lessons, which will make any normal person in India or any other part of this world, the diaspora, make them feel proud about what ancient India was. So standing up for a Janagana Mana, a national anthem for 1 minute, or producing a Mexican wave in the auditorium while Virat Kohli or the retired MS Dhoni hits a sixer is not going to make me a great Indian. So in my aspect, an Indian is the one who realizes what kind of a history, architecture, literature, astronomy, astrology, mathematics, biological sciences, metallurgy, Vedic scriptures that we have bequeathed, whatever has been bequeathed to us. If I realize that, is where I become a true Bharatiya. So this was a course that I began, and I want to come up with many, many courses under this umbrella. So this course is a paid course. So it's a paid course for 20 e-lessons, and the course is going to begin this Saturday. And in 15 days, with no promotion, just with a post on Facebook and Twitter, we have had 1,639 paid registrations by Sishyas across 5 continents and 27 countries. And we have 2 Christians who have registered for the course. And because the course has terms and conditions. The first term is you have to be respectful of Hinduism as a religion and civilization. Second rule is you will have to be equally respectful of other world religions. Only if you agree to this, you can sign up.
That's great. That's amazing.
So we had people coming, and we have batch 2 registrations which have begun very recently, and the first e-class for batch 2 is beginning on Vijayadashmi, October 25th. So I see the urge in the masses to know something about our culture. So I feel probably this will be the path that I will be taking henceforth.
That's fantastic. And the last question connects to this, and then we can let you go, is what is it that the world today can gain from Ramanuja's or Sri Vaishnavism that can really impact the way we engage with each other or engage with the world?
So One thing that Ramanuja's philosophy advocates is we are different by various factors, be it birth, practice, education, economic status, we call it Varna Ashrama, then race, nationality, and so on. Though there may be such huge disparities, visible disparities that we see between us, the Jivatma Tattvam, which is housed in all of us, is the same and is equal before the eyes of the Lord. So there is nothing like your God and my God. There is nothing like your Jivatma and my Jivatma. We are equal before God. And the second thing, what Ramanuja's philosophy also states is just raw knowledge from scriptures will not take us a long way. It is only when such knowledge is interspersed with love and devotion will that knowledge be of any value to us or to the society. So Ramanuja's philosophy of devotion interspersed with knowledge, that bhakti rupa panna jnanam, is very, very applicable to the world. If that bhakti element comes into knowledge in the world, I don't think we will be fighting for religions and we will be ridiculing deities.
Well, Dushyanth, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to say, or anything else you want to plug? Is there something like that?
How do people register for your class? Is it on Deshika?
That's a good one.
It's desikadaya.org/AEP. AEP stands for Abhinava E-Patashala. Once you go to that particular URL, it's a step-by-step process. It will take
We'll put the link in the description.
I'll put the link in the description. Any last things you want to say before we log off?
Thank you for taking your time and for having had generally people say it's a fruitful discussion. I think we should leave the word fruitful for the audience to say.
Yeah.
So I think it was a good discussion. Very good talking to the both of you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Pushpa sugandha sumalaya samire pavana munijana yamuna tire pavana munijana yamuna tire gayati vanamali Gayati vanamali maduram Gayati vanamali